Good afternoon, everybody. Kate here from the Safeguarding Association, joining you for our Safeguarding Spotlight on. And today I want to talk to you about key performance indicators, or more commonly known as KPIs. These are not a new phenomena. If you've worked in and around business or even as part of the senior leadership team for any amount of time, you will know that key performance indicators have been about for a very, very, very long time. What's not usual with KPIs at a sort of strategic level is to have too many specific KPIs in relation to safeguarding. And I've had a number of conversations with Safeguarding Leaders Hub members over the last couple of weeks, where particularly within the commercial sector and particularly within the apprenticeship sphere, the issue of KPIs has been appearing more and more. And with that comes a level of confusion, a level of anxiety, and really trying to understand what that means within a safeguarding setting. And for any of you who've worked within independent training providers, those of you who work within apprenticeship teams, particularly, who kind of sit not necessarily outside of keeping children safe in education, but certainly not necessarily feeling directly within it. This idea of having a KPI for safeguarding can feel really uncomfortable because it feels like it's being shoehorned in. But also, I am acutely aware that you're already fighting to have a safeguarding team. You're already fighting to have safeguarding on the agenda at any senior level. And it's often a bit like training. When things get a bit tight financially, one of the things that these providers can look to do is reduce its safeguarding spend. Not because it's an expense that shouldn't be had, but more because they need to understand where it sits within the business. And sometimes the issue of safeguarding in those sorts of provisions can feel a bit ethereal. It's a bit intangible, and can be quite difficult to explain for those who've never been anywhere near it. So in terms of key performance indicators in those sorts of settings, it's not unusual for directors, for senior leaders to start asking questions about how do we monitor our safeguarding. And some of the things that they can start to ask you to do can be around some specifics. And for example, we all know that issues around mental health, particularly for the 16 to 24 age range, is a massive issue. I'm fairly certain for every single one of you, that will be one of your largest areas. And you can end up with things like KPIs around, or being asked to have a KPI around how long you're intervening in somebody's life, how long they're working with a service, how long it takes to close a case down, things like that, that aren't necessarily sitting terribly well with what safeguarding is. But I would encourage you to look at KPIs as a way to review regularly your practice. So whilst you may not want a key performance indicator around how long you are working with someone and having a specific time as to how long you will do that, you might want to have a key performance indicator around the number of reviews that happen. So making sure that every case has a review every 3 to 4 weeks, for example. Making sure that there is sufficient notes on the system. Maybe something around how long it takes to close a case from the moment that the learner is no longer using the service. That's not to say they won't come back and use the service again, but just as an indicator of how long it's taken you to close things off when it reaches that particular point. You might also look at how many areas, and again, thinking about reviews, thinking about the conversations you need to have. If you are a service that is offering a level of counselling intervention, how many sessions are each learner entitled to as part of that? And then you might want to measure how big the uptake is of those. Let's use 6 for an example. Of those 6 sessions, how many of those sessions are being utilised? How many students are using all of those sessions? And where do they go next? Now, that might be particularly difficult to ascertain, but it might be something that you're able to look at and go, well, we offer this level of support, but there's nothing further we can do. So this is what we do, and this is how long they're involved with it. So key performance indicators aren't the devil, but they are, if you aren't careful, something that can cause you difficulties if you don't think through the purpose of the KPI. And if you are getting pushback from your management sphere, if you're getting directors with their underwear in a little bit of a twist because they want to see certain KPIs, then please do get in touch. I have been supporting Safeguarding Leaders Hub members with this issue right across September. So please don't feel like you're on your own. It is unusual for education in its kind of more usual sense to have KPIs, but it isn't within a commercial setting. And it's really just understanding how the two can fit together, what they might look like, how you might be able to make that work so that the directors have the information that they need to understand really the purpose of and why they're funding a section of their business, and to help them understand the costs associated with that and the impact that that is having. And sometimes that's a bit intangible, but in terms of impact, that's where your learner feedback comes in. That's where your conversations with staff come in. How confident are they feeling at dealing with some of these maybe lower level issues? How confident are they about referrals? Have you got referrals from every area, or do you know you've got some departments that are making lots of referrals, whereas others you might not have heard from 6 months and start to wonder, well, hang on, what is going on? So in those sorts of circumstances where you're looking to increase the engagement to measure the impact of what safeguarding's doing, you might want to think about some key performance indicators around the numbers of referrals and where they are coming from. That's not to say that the person who's making lots of them is in the wrong in any way, shape or form, but more that you need to understand as a safeguarding lead where you aren't getting any, so that you can then go and do some investigation to understand why you aren't getting referrals from that particular area. Is it because for the last few months, their particular cohorts actually haven't raised any particular issues? Or is it on the other end of the scale that they're raising, they want to raise lots of issues, but the tutor's just not listening, or the tutor and the students just don't have that relationship and the learners really don't feel confident in sharing any information at all? Once you've unpicked that and you've worked out what those issues might be, then you can start to do something about it. And in those sorts of circumstances, I think that KPIs can be quite useful. And I use KPIs with some of the chair work that I do. So we look at things like how safe are students. We look at things like training and development. And this time of year, you have got lots of staff who need to undertake that they have read Keeping Children Safe in Education, that they are engaged with Keeping Children Safe in Education, that they understand what Keeping Children Safe in Education says, means, what to do. And then there are other layers of how do they then make a referral? Do they understand how that applies within your particular setting? So for me, I think KPIs can be really, really helpful. I think you have to be a little cautious about anything that's incredibly specific, and that potentially is restricting the use of a safeguarding service, where that is felt to be potentially too restrictive, or maybe curtailing a contract that you have with a third party service. I'm thinking about counselling here in that particular scenario. But broader, I think they're really useful. And if you are thinking this is something you might want to do to help you understand better what's going on, then a really good starting point is to look at the Ofsted framework. Look at the Ofsted framework and then look at what Keeping Children Safe in Education says, and use those as your benchmarks, and then work out what it is underneath each of those that you want to measure. So how are you going to be assured that you're reaching ABC? And what are the things underneath that you need to do in order to assure yourselves as leaders that this is what is happening and this is what is going on? Again, if this is something you're struggling with or something that you would like to have more support with, then come and join the Safeguarding Leaders Hub. That is what we do. We're in there. I will be your critical friend and massively support you to get the right KPIs in place so that you know what you're measuring, you know why you're measuring it, and you can use that data productively to demonstrate the valiant work that you are all doing within a safeguarding setting. If you've any questions, please feel free to pop them under this video and I will do my best to answer them where I can. If you'd like more information about the Safeguarding Leaders Hub, then comment hub underneath and I will be in touch and send you a link to the details about the Safeguarding Leaders Hub. For now, take care.